Hello everyone, Kaoz here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. What do you guys think is one of the biggest updates in the history of the game that wasn't brand new content? Whatever your answer is, I bet those are not as big as the massive combat rebalance we got last week, which has been in the works for a few months now. In this video, we will go over the most important changes and give you a summary of what you need to be aware of to play more efficiently in 2024 and beyond. Boys and girls, for every new subscriber and a like on this video, my puppy Moneda will get a frozen treat to help with this infernal heat. This update brought massive changes, so if you have any questions, join our Discord with a link in the description. If you remember, a lot of information prior to this update was still up for discussion for Jagex to balance numbers for all stages of the game. With the changes finally coming to the live servers, these are now set, and we will have to wait and see how more metas develop over the next few months. In this video, however, I will go over the most important things to keep in mind for both equipment and monsters. Without any further ado, let's begin. First on the list, we have the fact that Ava's device's ammo saving feature now applies to javelins. You guys can let me know in the comments if ballista weapons and javelins were used for anything in the game other than KO weapons in PvP. And it just makes you wonder if this is something Jagex realized just now after years of them being in the game, because nobody really uses them. We got a brand new magic amulet in the game. Does it bridge the gap between the occult necklace and everything else? Well, quite the opposite. The Amulet of Cursed Magic dropped by necromancers south of Shazian provide a minus 80% magic damage bonus. And according to Jagex, this is for niche scenarios where you want your damage to be as low as possible. What these scenarios are might involve those masochistic accounts with crazy restrictions, so this is not going to apply to the normal player. Early game Chads rejoice. The prayers Burst of Strength and the Sharp Eye now increase your level by 1 in their respective combat style, as long as your level in those skills is below 20. I'm not sure how big of an impact this will have on brand new accounts, but if you make one, definitely use these prayers. And speaking of early game prayers, Thick Skin, Burst of Strength, Clarity of Thought, Sharp Eye, and Mystic Will had their prayer pointed range reduced from 5 per minute to 1.65 per minute. This means that noobs are now encouraged to use these prayers for early combat, because prior to this, the prayer drain versus benefit was simply not worth it. One of the simplest but nicest changes coming from this update is the removal of auto-casted delay for all combat spells in the game. In previous videos, I said that this was for ancient spells only, but with big updates for elemental spells, this will also benefit from it. Prior to this, if you wanted to use offensive spells immediately, you would have to cast them manually. But now, that is a thing of the past. One of the most iconic items in the game, and also one of the most hated grinds for Ironman, the Dragon Warhammer has had its drop rate improved from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 3,000. Don't get too excited though, because if you see the graph for this item, thanks to the Elder Maul buff, the Dragon Warhammer has never been cheaper in the history of the game. Not to say that it's useless, but it will be a nice thing on your way to that mega rare from Chambers. For this next one, I will just take a little bit longer because oh my god, even after buffs to the Soul Reaper Axe, it is still one of the most coin flip items in the entire game. So for the changes, your Soul Reaper stacks are now kept even if you switch weapons. Don't take too long though, because you will still lose your stacks, this time every 20 ticks instead of 12. So you now have a little longer for, let's say, Vardorvis to respawn. The best to change in my opinion is that when you lose stacks now, you get HP back whenever they start wearing off. Meaning that if you AFK, you will regain all of that HP back, which is massive. I don't want to sound like a Reddit mouth breather, but my main complaint with this item is that it is still heavily inaccurate even after 5 stacks. Even if you forget its price of 400 million GP, this is an incredibly difficult item to get on your own, and it doesn't really feel worth using anywhere except for Vardorvis. And even then, you can still hit multiple zeros in a row. Okay, venting aside, the Ancient Godsword changes are now live, and if you remember, the special attack made it so if you landed a hit against your target, you would heal 25 HP after a few ticks. That heal is now 15% of the target's maximum hit points up to a cap of 25. And 15 against players. As long as your enemy has around 167 HP, you should heal the same amount for monsters, and the players with 99 HP will heal 15. The reason why the Elder Maul went from around 8 million GP to over 150 million GP is because it now has a new special attack. For 50% energy, you will deal a crushing blow with a 25% extra accuracy that will reduce your target's defense by 35% of its current value on a successful hit. The cool thing about it is that you can now ditch the Dragon Warhammer and a Vernic Defender you brought along the Dragon Warhammer, and it should save an inventory spot. It also has a pretty sick animation, so make sure to put it to use. After this update, you should now see slightly less zeros whenever you are in combat. I will skip on boring math, but prior to this update, whenever you hit your enemy you could miss or land a hit. If you landed a successful hit, for some odd reason, you still had a chance to roll a 0. But now, whenever you successfully land the attack roll, you will never hit a 0. Keep in mind that you can still miss an attack with any combat style, which means still hitting zeros from time to time. Collection Loggers and Ironman, this one is for you. Even though the Nightmare's dupe protection proposal failed, her uniques are now more common and should save on multiple, maybe hundreds of hours of grinding for these items. You can see the improvements on screen right now, and I will personally stream Thosani until I see one of her uniques. If the Tombs of a Mascot was my favorite raid before, it just got 1,000 times better. In short, even though baboons in the Baba Puzzle Room are now overall healthier, you can now deal your maximum hit on baboons if you attack them with a style they are weak against. Prioritize attacking melees with mage, rangers with melee, and magers with ranged. Venom and Shaman monkeys have a lower HP, but don't have any particular weakness. As for volatile baboons, it is just better to detonate them whenever they are near other monkeys. Prior to this update, my solo PB was around 3 minutes, and on my first attempt after this update, I cleared the room in 2 minutes and 14 seconds. This will be even faster if you're doing this in a group. One of the biggest TOA complaints for a long time is that Baba still hit like a truck even through prayer, especially at higher invocations, which means that Red X was almost absolutely mandatory. This update made it so her through prayer damage is now 25% instead of 33%. Not a huge improvement, but a welcome one nevertheless if you mess up your Red X. Okay fellas, so let's get into some juicy changes. The Inquisitor's Mace received a massive buff if used alongside the Inquisitor's armor. Prior to this update, the armor set would increase your accuracy and the damage bonus by 2.5% to weapons using the Crush style. This is still the case after the update, but if you equip an Inquisitor's Mace, this effect is now tripled for a total of 7.5% accuracy and the damage bonus. This is absolutely massive, and this setup will now rival the Scythe until you are able to get the melee mega weapon. For some additional thoughts, after testing different setups on stream, my max hit with best in slot melee with Inquisitor's armor and the mace is 58. The same setup in Torva armor is a 56. If we keep in mind that Inquisitor's armor not only has a higher crush bonus, but an additional accuracy and the damage if used with Inquisitor's mace, if you have the money for these niche items, I personally think they will now be better to use at Casual Slayer for higher damage and more consistent hits. The other thing we talked about on stream is that with Nightmare uniques being now more common but more useful, they might balance out in terms of price, and they won't really see dramatic increase or decrease on the Grand Exchange. Sure, even if more of them come into the game thanks to better drop rates, since they are more desirable now, more players may want to buy them, keeping them relevant for years to come. Up next we have an update that was poised to be absolutely massive in the form of ranged weakness to tons of monsters across Galenor. I said was because Jagex himself said that these changes won't really shift the meta too much, and this was mostly to open the way for potential new rewards in the future, and monsters who would be more effectively fought using the ranged attack style. If you don't remember from one of my previous videos, ranged weapons are now classified in 3 categories. Light, including weapons like darts, knives, and thrown axes, standard, including arrows from regular and magical bows, and heavy, which include bolts and javelins. If you want to check out the wiki, a ton of monsters had their page modified to include these weaknesses, and for early to mid-game players, it might still be a good idea using ammo to which your target is weak against. For now, this is not going to change any of the established metas, except making the NPCs you see on screen a little weaker to the respective ammunition type, so people can have more options when fighting them, and not really making them feel like they need the absolute best weapon to kill a boss efficiently. Wherever you would use ranged weapons will still be effective, since this is mostly to prepare us for future content. With ranged out of the way, let's get into elemental spells. We will start with something I completely forgot about, and it is that prior to this update, every single elemental spell in the standard spellbook had its own max hit regardless of your magic level, increased by percentage magic damage bonus. Wind Surge had a max hit of 21, Water had a max hit of 22, Earth 23, and Fire 24. Now, every single elemental spell of its respective category, being Strike, Bolt, Blast, Wave, and Surge, will get their max hit increased to the highest spell you have the access to. Meaning that if you have level 75 magic, all your wave spells will have a max hit of 20. This takes us to our next point, the Tome of Fire, Water, and Earth, thanks to the Waycoatl, which will be the new group of boss introduced in the second part of Alamur. Before last week's changes, the Tome of Fire and Water would increase their respective elemental spell damage by 50% as long as your tome had pages. This damage boost is now 10%, and it sounds like a tremendous nerf on its own. But in reality, elemental spells just got a huge upgrade. Keep in mind that they will still boast a damage bonus of 50 for fire and a 20 for water against players, and the 10% only applies to monsters. The reason for this massive nerf to both items is because a ton of monsters in old school RuneScape are now weak to certain elemental spells. In short, if elemental weakness applies to them, your accuracy and the damage bonus will increase according to how weak they are against a certain element. For example, a fire giant now has a 100% weakness to water spells, meaning that your accuracy and the damage will go up by a whopping 100%. Pretty simple, right? Some of the most notable changes are barrows, ghosts, and skeletons being weak to air, color dragons, fire giants, and the giant mole being weak to water, metal dragons, water fiends, and worms being weak to earth, and Zulrah, Vespula Portal, and almost anything with the word ice in it being weak to fire. I will go over my personal thoughts on these changes based on my testing on stream, but these are mostly aimed towards early, mid, and even the beginning of late game to dispose of enemies a little quicker. If you're an endgame Giga Chad with most items at your disposal, you should be able to kill these enemies the way you always have. And now for the biggest topic from the update, changes to a ton of magic items, more specifically a huge nerf to the occult necklace to give other items their time in the spotlight. We will go over equipment changes first, and then show you a few max hits with different setups for the mid, late, and end game. The occult necklace went from 10% to 5% magic damage bonus. Ancestral robe pieces went from 2 to 3% each, and Virtus pieces went from 1 to 2% each. And remember that the additional 3% magic damage per piece only applies to ancient spells, meaning a total of 15% magic damage bonus when casting these. Infinity, Dagon High, Third Age, Aram, Blue Moon, Elder Chaos Druid, and Bloodbark Armor all gained 1% magic damage bonus per piece, and keep in mind that all of these are made up of 3 pieces being hat, body, and legs. Except for Infinity, but the buff does not apply to gloves and boots. The biggest winner from this update is the Elite Void Mage set, which now offers 5% damage when wearing all 4 pieces, up from a total of 2.5%. For other equipment, the Arcane Spirit Shield now provides 3% magic damage bonus, the Mage's Book, Ancient Wyvern Shield, and the Malediction Ward provide 2%, Eternal Boots provide 1%, and both the Based and Imbued Seer's Ring provide 0.5%. When it comes to prayer, Augury, Mystic Might, and Mystic Lore increase your damage by 4%, 2%, and 1% respectively. Keep in mind that the Tunic and Shadow only applies to damage for worn items, so obviously it's not going to affect Augury by suddenly making it 12 or 16%. On screen right now you are seeing some max hits with pretty standard gear for mid, late, and end game. The numbers towards the bottom of the screen show the same setups before and after the update, and also having Magic Prayer active. Mystic Might was used for Void and the Dagon High, and Augury was used for Aram, Virtus, and Ancestral. Void Armor didn't really change at all because of the redistribution from the Occult Necklace to worn items. And in this case, Mystic Might doesn't really alter max hit too much, so if this is what you're working with for magic, you're better off not using Mystic Might and saving on a little bit of prayer points. Dagon High sees an extra max hit after the update, all thanks to Mystic Might. This time around we are also using the Malediction Ward and the Seer's Ring, which after the update sees a tiny increase in percentage. Paired up with a boosting prayer, the max hit for this setup went from 36 to a humble 37, and from 40 to 41 if using an Imbued Heart. Not that people might have it at this point, but just for the sake of testing it out. Base damage with Aram didn't really change, but we do get an extra max hit thanks to Augury and other pieces that had their damage boosted. The Imbued Heart also gives us an extra max hit after the update, but again, this might still be an expensive item to purchase at this stage of your account. Getting into the big leagues, Virtus with Arcane also sees 1 and 2 extra max hits when wearing items you see on screen. Critical thing to point out is that I bought an Arcane Spirit Shield just to test it out, and I do not recommend getting one at all. If you have money for one, simply turn it into a fortified ward of eliteness, because this item is still pretty expensive, because grinding Corporeal Beast is a pain in the ass. And now for what you have all been waiting for, how is the best in slot magic setup affected? Well, this time around we lose one max hit with our base equipment, and without the imbued heart and augury. If you have unlocked every magic item in the game, you will keep your max hit of 66 as long as you turn augury on. The ancestral set, imbued god cape, occult necklace, tormented bracelet, eternal boots, and the magus ring paired up with the tunic and shadow give us a total of 72% magic damage bonus, down from 75 prior to this update. With augury on, this will be a total of 76%. Inside the Tombs of a Mascot, the same combo now offers 96%, and Augury will complete the 100% bonus we had before this massive update. Just for fun, we also tested Fire and Water Surge on stream with a Harmonized Nightmare Staff and their respective elemental tomes. At first, I was surprised that the max hit went from 49 to 36 with Fire Surge, but oddly enough, Water Surge stayed at 36 before and after the update. People were quick to point out that these spells would shine at places where their damage would increase thanks to elemental weaknesses, but like we said before, if you have best in slot melee, ranged or magic, you're just better off using those instead of these spells. In short, and also like elemental and ranged weaknesses for monsters, these changes are mostly aimed for people who are between the early and the late game for slightly more damage for combat to feel a little better. And endgame players won't really see many changes in the way we do things for bossing and raids. In conclusion, I am mostly neutral when it comes to these magic changes, because as I've said before, all we can do is adapt, since Old School RuneScape is the digital version of the most potent form of Walter White's special because of how addictive this game is. My personal favorite was the update to Baba Puzzle Room, and it will make TOA less painful to grind on my way to that Masori top that still keeps dodging me. On the negatives, I hate how the Soul Reaper axe is still absolutely terrible to use, being an absolute coin flip every single fight. Remember that not every single update has to be catered to the absolute sweatiest of players, because whenever Jagex makes the game more accessible and appealing to newcomers, that just means extra people that will continue to get involved in this pixelated adventure, which means a longer lifespan for the game and more updates for all of us. Boys and girls, that's pretty much it for this chunky video. Thank you so much for coming and for making it this far. If you did, tell me what change you liked or disliked the most and why. Include the term RSN with your username in your comments, and you will be eligible for our weekly bond giveaway, for which we will draw a winner on Friday's stream. I want to give a massive thank you to all the channel members who have decided to support this project monetarily. Every single dollar goes towards supporting my wife and my puppy with our daily supply of tacos and beans. If you like what I do here, click the join button below to see all of the cool perks you can get in the videos, in the live streams, and in the Discord for a monthly fee. In the next one, I will give you guys an updated Tombs of a Mascot invocation guide for you to go from an absolute pleb all the way to that beautiful fan kit and a few purples along the way. For now, I hope you have an amazing day, have an amazing week, and I will see you then. Peace.